Hi, my name is Laura Kelley. I am the chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party, and I am here with the mayor of South Miami, Javier Fernández. Thank you so much for being here today.
Laura, pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
It is absolutely my honor and pleasure to be here with you. Tell me, please, um, what inspired you to run for mayor of South Miami?
Yeah, unexpected opportunity, not something after running and failing to win a state Senate seat that I thought I would do, per se. Been around local government for a long time, working as a chief of staff to a mayor. And so I was approached actually by two sitting commissioners in South Miami at the time who I had worked very closely with when I was a member of the state legislature and had a good rapport with them. And they thought it would be a good time for someone like me to kind of step forward and run. And that kind of planted the seed. And then after that, had some conversations with some stakeholders that were interested in doing things in and around South Miami, and realized that I could be the right possible public partner for them to advance projects that had been stalled for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, after sitting in the legislature in the back rows, marginally impacting legislation,
Right.
the ability to kind of do some good work in my community near home, so I was not away from my family, seemed more and more like an attractive opportunity and a good way for me to contribute and serve. So that kind of propelled me in 2022 to throw my hat in the ring, and we're here today.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so what is the good work that you want to do in South Miami and that you have been doing?
Yeah. So first of all, we wanted to make South Miami as predictable, right? A place where people could see themselves doing business, right? We've had a reputation for being a little bit unpredictable, which means that people forego opportunities here.
Mhm.
And so first and foremost, I think I'm proudest of the fact that we have a rational, functional city commission that even at our most controversial is respectful and works well together. And we've kind of tried to set that tone of professionalism, and we have. And I think we've gotten a lot of good feedback, and we're seeing a lot of interest in the business community and from residents, both in terms of investment and their vote of confidence in a lot of what we're doing. So in our first 2 years, we managed to improve South Miami Park, which had been an eyesore for a long time, and modernize a facility on which 900 kids are playing, book and knock at the field certified for their own home games. That improvement's been done, and now we're adding concession and bathroom facilities that hopefully will be finished later this year. We passed a $65 million bond referendum with the idea that we wanted to, and we're planning for sizable investments in our city's infrastructure. And so that passed with just under 60% of the vote.
Great.
And so what the focus has been on revitalizing our town center, which we now call the SoMi District, and bringing more people to it, and also improving and investing in the city's infrastructure. What we want to have is the most amenitized small city in Miami-Dade County. Our geography is our biggest asset.
Yeah.
We want to leverage that by giving people everything they could want to access within a 10-minute drive of their homes, so that South Miami is a choice destination for residents and businesses alike.
Yeah. And tourists as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're hoping that we can add a little bit of that transient tourism element. The University of Miami is an important partner in that effort. We're having conversations with them about how we can bring more of their facilities, back of house services, into the city, given that they are constrained from a land perspective, right? So their core academic functions can stay on campus, and we'll happily receive, their accounting departments, their convention and conference facilities. And so we've been talking to folks like the sponsors of Sunset Place about the ability to kind of bring a hotel on property that has those amenities for convening to help support our food and beverage offerings today, and hopefully expand them over time. Because, I live 10 blocks from our SoMi district, and the most frustrating part of it is that my daughter, who's now 16 and is on the go all the time.
Oh, no.
The last place she wanted me to take her was South Miami. She'd go to places like the Falls, or Merrick Park or Coconut Grove, right? We want our community to be the first choice for our residents. And part of that is having a robust suite of offerings.
Absolutely. And what's so funny is that I even mean tourism from within Miami-Dade.
Absolutely.
Because when I go to South Miami, I'm like, oh, wow. I remember the first time, not too long ago that I came, I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea this was here. There's a ton of really great restaurants. It's really nice to sit outside and watch people go by. And, there's the arts festival. There's so many things to do that I honestly had no idea when I first moved to Miami-Dade County.
And we've got old staples like Deli Lane and Old Lisbon and Pasta Mia that are there and continue to kind of hold it down. And I've added a bunch of new offerings. On Olivera, which is a new restaurant that's opened, is fantastic. Barbella. We've got the Great Babe that just opened as well in Little Space. Kitchen 57, which brought back the original chef to town, all now kind of adding to the mix. And so we're trying to do things on the margins that can help them. We've spent the last 2 years really building up our social media presence and platform. And so we now have dedicated staff that are doing vignettes and profiles of those businesses to try to help them attract business. And we've also kind of now with the Better Bus Project and Miami-Dade's efforts, tried to reimagine how we offer transit services to kind of build on that and complement what they're doing. And so we've now struck a partnership with VIA as well to expand the offerings during their 7 to 7 service hours in our zone. And on the weekends, kind of bring people from the immediate areas around us, like the Southern Gables, Northern Pinecrest, unincorporated Dade, into our town center. So if you want to get a free ride on SoMe, on Metro Connect into SoMe and out of SoMe, you can at no cost on Thursdays through Sundays.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
that's sometimes the biggest issue is just like finding parking and
It is.
having to,
And
deal with traffic.
And we've had a reputation about parking enforcement, if you haven't heard. And so we've been trying to kind of right size that and reduce enforcement at certain hours where there's no demand. But we also know that as we grow, there'll be more friction coming in and out of the SoMe district. And so during that transition, we want to support our businesses and we want to make it as easy as for people to get in and out of that space without having to worry about parking enforcement, and just the hassle of driving if you want to have an extra glass of wine when you're enjoying a great meal.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are some of the challenges that you're facing as, the mayor of South Miami? I
Yeah.
know you've been in Tallahassee. Are they helping? Are they hurting?
It's a little bit of both. Sometimes the hurting is more than the helping, but we've had a very good partnership with the members of this delegation that represent our city. I mean, we're very grateful to Representative Busada Cabrera and Senator Calatiyu. They're always available to us. They're present, so we appreciate that. We've also had a good working relationship with leadership that I serve with in Representative Perez, and on the Senate side with other senators as well. That's translated into some success getting money in the budget for key priorities like that are focused on sustainability, particularly septic to sewer conversion,
right?
Which for us is an issue in terms of preserving water quality and investment where when we make that investment as a city, we really don't get a return on it, right? We are building infrastructure to turn over to a sister agency, in this case, Miami-Dade County, but with the goal of providing better service, since we have some basins where the water table is jeopardizing the functionality of our septic systems, and also impairing water quality in adjacent canals and eventually Biscayne Bay. So we've been successful in getting dollars at both the federal and state level, and so our thanks to, again, Representative U.S. Rep. Maria Villa Salazar for helping us get dollars that we're putting to work in portions of South Miami. But we've had our issues with the governor vetoing appropriations last year. Worked really hard to get money in the budget. Unfortunately, it all went away. This year, we're back in that process, both from a grant-making perspective. We're hopefully to get good news this March on a septic to sewer grant through DEP, and we're hoping that we'll get more money to finish the existing projects that we have as well. But the biggest issues tend to be, I think, well-intentioned attempts at preemption that really, unfortunately, when you use a blunt instrument, right, it does not necessarily work in every community and creates other ancillary issues. So, I mean, I'm a real estate attorney, land use attorney, see the need for affordable housing, see the impediments in many jurisdictions around development because of a lack of predictability in process, which is why I talk about predictability first. But Live Local has brought some challenges, and frankly, because of the complexities around the conflicts of a small city that's 2 square miles, right, and has a very active urban center near a transit station that we want to grow. Having that close proximity of mixed use zoning designations with a very sizable development envelope up against within a half mile of single family, right? The conflicts that were present in that legislation were really apparent to us. And so we worked really hard to try to create a regime for Sunset Place,
Right.
to get that project started, hopefully, without necessarily imperiling the quality of life conditions in our single family neighborhoods. This is stuff we were doing anyways. Unfortunately, that brought those issues to a head. And, we've worked well with Representative Lopez to try to kind of right size some of those conflicts. And we're grateful to her and others for listening to our concerns. But preemption has been a source of a lot of consternation, and it goes from the sublime to the somewhat irrational.
Yeah. Let's just like for the listeners, like explain a little bit about what preemption is. I mean, I know that was I ran for state house last term.
Yeah.
And that was a huge issue. Like you said, it's a blanket type blunt instrument, as you mentioned, for that, when we have different communities that have different needs. And that's why we have, federal law and state law, and why we have local law. And so when we have the state law basically preempting municipalities from making ordinances and laws that work better for that community, it can be difficult to manage.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always believed that the governments that work best are the ones that are closest to the people, right? Because of that proximity. I mean, there's no place to hide in my community. It's that small, right? I'd like to hide on occasion. It's hard, but that's the fun part about it, is to being able to work really closely with the community. And preemption raises some issues. I'll give you one example. I'm probably in the most irrational of the recent proposals. There's been you're familiar with the concept of an injunction, and those are not easy to get. You got to show substantial likelihood of prevailing, right, on the facts. And right now we operate in a world where I pass an ordinance. I'll give you an example. We have a gentleman's club in South Miami that, for the most part, has been a very, very, good business partner. Right. Not a lot of issues, but we had a rash of assaults and a shooting recently. Mm-hmm. And what we realized was it was probably alcohol fueled, right? Alcoholic beverage sales at that location were going through 6 a.m.
Right.
So, and we saw lots of conflicts with that business and its impacts on other businesses that offered breakfast offerings in the morning, particularly on Monday mornings. And so we wanted to rein in some of the unintended consequences of that service by reducing the alcoholic beverage hours. I had to do that very quickly before October 1st of last year, because today I could no longer do that, right? If I wanted to change those alcoholic beverage service hours from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., I forget where we ended up, right, to kind of allow folks to leave that establishment and not have it bleed over and impact other businesses, I've been robbed of that authority. Right. Because that business owner can now sue us. And as soon as they sue us, not after showing any likelihood of prevailing, right, that ordinance is automatically enjoined. Right. And so what we find ourselves is a situation where, as local leaders, people want us to do things to preserve their quality of life, but our hands are increasingly tied. And so I'm hopeful that, over time, through conversation and less criticism, helping our delegation understand what people want, what's important to them, we can find a better balance in that conversation.
Absolutely. And we had the same issue actually in Doral, where I live. Same. It wasn't a gentleman's club, but it was a nightclub that also had a number of shootings.
Familiar with it. Yeah. Very difficult situation.
Absolutely. And, I know that local leaders try to find the best solution for the community while also not harming the business. And sometimes it's a very delicate balance, but it's a delicate balance that, like you said, has to be done on the local level rather than on the state level.
Yeah, I don't know of a way to fashion a rule of statewide application, right, that would work for every particular circumstance, right? And so I think, there's got to be some faith in the fact that the people that elected the legislator will exercise the same wisdom in electing their local leadership, right? That's going to be responsive to their needs and their wants, and ultimately deliver on those priorities that both preserve, resident priorities and also strike a fair balance when it comes to protecting the interests of business in their community as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, you're the closest to the community, so you're going to know, much more closely what the residents want. I mean, it's hard. For example, everybody knows, who the mayor is. I mean, especially in a smaller community, people are more engaged with the city council, these races. I found this when I was running. Nobody knows who the state rep is or the state senator is. Yeah. But what people don't often understand, that those are the people that have the most power over our daily lives. And I can imagine that that's a challenge.
Yeah, it's hard. It's not hard. It's not easy being a state rep or a state senator. It's, requires work. The subject matter is vast, right? I feel very blessed that my issues here are pretty narrow. Right. You spend a lot of time up there preparing for committee meetings and to understand issues that, frankly, for me were issues of first impressions, just things I'd never come across before. So I don't envy their job because I've done it. I know how hard it is, and I know how hard the travel is on one's family and the ability to work and earn a living because those jobs do not
They do
pay
not pay.
very well.
No.
Pay a little bit better than your job, I think, and my
Yeah,
job
exactly.
currently. But they're important jobs, and they do wield a lot of power. And so it's also incumbent as us as stakeholders, elected leaders locally, to communicate with them about where some of the changes they're making could have a really negative impact. And I'll give you another example right now. There's a bill up to discuss the elimination of a very important economic development tool, one of the few that we have in Florida that's worked really well for a lot of jurisdictions. Everything south of Fifth Street on South Beach was rebuilt with the help of a CRA. Our beautiful museums downtown, the port tunnel, all financed through that kind of a model. And they're talking about eliminating that as a tool. And I will tell you that we have been looking at reinstating one here in South Miami to help us finance critical infrastructure. We know we want to grow around our transit station. The county wants us to do that, so we enhance ridership. And so we need to deal with obvious investments like investing in our water and sewer infrastructure to support the units that we want to build, improving our transit connectivity and enhancing the station. So right now they're talking about eliminating that tool, and it's going to really impair our ability to finance those improvements other than with tax increases or on a more modest approach, which is, with trying to capture whatever growth we have in our tax base and dedicating it to bonds, which it takes time.
Yeah.
It's challenging.
And let me ask you, if you mentioned that, and again, I imagine that part of it is your relationships that you built over time by being a state representative and knowing the individuals who do represent us. Do you find that the state representatives and the state senators are coming back to the community to hold, for example, town halls or just explanatory sessions about what they're doing in Tallahassee and how it impacts the local community? I mean, it's one thing to communicate it with you as the mayor, but are they able to explain this to the citizens and the impact that it will have?
Yeah, I'm not following what they do from a community outreach perspective quite as clearly or quite as closely as I did when I was serving. I mean, I used to certainly have town halls on education policy and transportation. I had a really good staff, 2 really good LAs that would put those together, and we would solicit feedback on what people wanted to see by way of policy in Tallahassee. I will say that both of my state rep, the leadership in the House in particular, where I have more relationships, and in the Senate are always a text or a call away. And I'll get texts about, hey, we've got some funding priorities you put in. What's really number 1 or number 2 on your list, so we can make a go at it. So we have those conversations. They defer to us on those appropriations requests. They're really just kind of adopted whole cloth for what our priorities are. So I mean, I think the rapport is good, but then there's always the atmospherics of Tallahassee. The politics often will trump a lot of that because of whatever the messaging cycle for the next election really dictates in terms of what the party leadership wants to see. So when it's just people working with people, it's great. When the people gets impacted by the politics, it gets more challenging.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know that was one of the things that I was always concerned about. And when I ran, I didn't know who my state rep was, and I thought it was very important for them to come back. And I know it's a very challenging job, like you said. It does not pay very well. It's very intense. It's an intense session. They're in session right now. And then prior to that, they have the committee work, and so I do understand the dedication and time that it takes for often being a thankless job as well. So
Yeah.
I totally understand that. But at the same time, I would like to see more engagement with what they do and how it impacts the communities, locally, because it is so important. And I do believe that the people they need to understand, they need to know,
Yeah.
they need to know who they are.
Look, everybody does the job differently. I mean, I would come to a city hall and kind of give an update and make myself available to questions after session to the various cities I represented. I had the honor of representing Palmetto Bay, Cutler Bay, Pinecrest, South Miami, West Miami, and Coral Gables. So I spent a lot of time with the elected leaderships in all those communities and reporting back to them, hearing their concerns. We would have independent town halls, but it's not only complicated by the fact that the job is not the most remunerative for the member, but they're also very limited in the staff that they have to actually work the district. I mean, you get, as a state house member, 1 legislative aide, and that job does not pay very well either.
Right.
So you're typically a very young person you're getting who's very talented, but it's their first job. and then you're getting one district aide. So, and that job doesn't pay very well. I was fortunate to have a really seasoned district aide who now works for the House Speaker today, and two really talented LAs that work for me throughout my time in Tallahassee. And they did a lot more than a lot of other offices on issues-based work. But if you're a state senator, it's not much better. You get one additional staff person. So really, it's you got to do a lot with very little. The districts particularly, my House district was very long, very narrow, very long. But the state Senate district I ran was even longer, went all the way to the Florida Keys from Central and South Dade. So you got to cover a lot of ground with very few resources. So it probably. I think if we want more responsive government at some level, we've got to think about whether we're willing to pay for it.
That's exactly what I was just thinking, is that we need to have, better remuneration for the people who are working, not only as legislators, but also for their staff, and have the resources to be able to be responsive to the community. Because like you said, it's almost an impossible task with everything else that they have to do.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of turn to, it's still related,
Yeah.
but, there's a lot of issues going on right now with immigration. It's impacting not only us on a federal level, a state level, and then at the local level. We just saw that the Coral Gables Police Department was the first city in Florida, I believe, to pass a 287 task force model, which essentially deputizes local police to act as ICE agents. And Hialeah approved it by the commission shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Are you feeling pressure to agree to this type of model? Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's an issue that we've been forced to deal with. It's not one that I ever thought would fall within the ambit of being a local municipal mayor. I dealt with it in Tallahassee in 2019 when issues like this were before the session, so I was very familiar with the 287G agreements. And, what we're doing is we're following the law, right? And what the law says that we're required to cooperate and execute any judicial warrant. And I think there's a misdemeanor statute that requires us to work to apprehend anyone who's entered the country illegally. And so we are complying with all those mandates so as to ensure that we are not classified as a sanctuary city as the law is written today in Florida statutes, memorialized. But nowhere does it require us to sign a 287G agreement, because we do not operate any sort of a detention facility. We don't operate a jail, right? And so that's really where these detainer warrants are mostly issued, as the feds want to make sure that county jails typically are holding people over so they can be picked up for a related immigration enforcement proceeding. I look at this as a lawyer first, and as the mayor second, right? In both cases, I'm sworn to uphold the law.
Yes.
And so, when I look at the 287G agreement, it seems pretty innocuous to some people on its face. It's no big deal. It's just doing what we're doing. But what it is doing is requiring cities to take on a lot more liability, right? And I think that's what people are not appreciating, right? There's also a series of related issues that people aren't talking about, right? Is this a unilateral modification of my bargaining agreement with my labor union, right? Are these activities covered by my insurance carrier because we bought a policy and paid a premium for certain covered activities? Does it go beyond that? I would argue yes. I would argue yes on the first point. It is a modification of our labor agreement. And then, fundamentally, if I'm going to help anyone do something, right, and take on this additional work, my expectation is that when something bad happens, like I get sued by someone for a civil rights violation, my expectation is that the federal government would say, you know what, we're going to indemnify you against that claim. That's not the case with these agreements, right? Yeah. They get the option of evaluating whether they want to defend us or not in a lot of this litigation, as I understand it. So from my perspective, tomorrow, actually, we had delegated authority to our police chief and manager to execute mutual aid agreements. We're taking that authority back as a commission. I'm sponsoring that suggested approach. I'm hopeful that our commission will support it. If the statute's modified to require us to sign it, we will, and we'll continue to cooperate as we have. But today, I don't see anything in the law that says I have to do this. And until those other questions about liability and labor-related issues and insurance-related issues are really solved, I don't think it's prudent, given my fiduciary duty to the city, to go ahead and jump into this pool with everyone else, because everyone else just kind of wants to go along to get along.
Yeah, and I understand that there's pressure. There's
Yeah.
pressure to do it, and certainly we don't want to be seen as like you said, not being cooperative. At the same time, there is a lot of liability issues, and I'm sure you understand that the relationship between the community and law enforcement is incredibly important, and where we have the police almost asking people for their papers, not only does that kind of take away resources from the law enforcement agencies themselves, the local law enforcement agencies here, it takes away their resources, their time to be investigating, prosecuting crimes that happen in our community. I think, do you believe that it ruptures the trust between the immigrant community
Look,
and the police?
I think a lot of people are really anxious right now, and that I can say for certain. What it does to the relationship between local police and individuals, I don't know the answer to that. Yes, or time will tell. What I can tell you is that none of us, from the president on down to your local mayor, want to have criminals running around
Of course.
their communities, right? So we are doing everything we're supposed to detain people who are committing illegal acts, because that's our job. Number one is to provide for the public safety. I think, though, to your point about resources, I think what people should be most concerned about in today's environment is that we are under-resourced across the board, right? As a state, right, we've done a really poor job of funding a collateral agency, which is our state's attorney's offices, to pay people a living wage to do that job after incurring law school debt, so that we have enough state's attorneys to actually prosecute run-of-the-mill crimes, right?
Absolutely.
We are short-staffed at the Florida Highway Patrol, right? We were just on Glenn and Milberg yesterday, right, talking about staffing issues there. They've now taken on an immigration enforcement task as well, and they're being asked to staff DMV offices because of the thing there. So we need to staff up that agency where there are substantial vacancies. And then locally, I will tell you, I think every department is struggling with recruitment. And so, I'm very focused on making sure that we get our agency up to our budgeted staffing levels. Our budget for 51 officers, we're down 4. We've been down 4 to 6 my entire tenure, and that's notwithstanding the fact that we've now added incentives to sponsor people through the academy so that officers commit to our department very early. But this is a chronic issue, and so if folks are concerned about crime, whether it's illegal immigrant-related crime or run-of-the-mill crime, what we should be talking about is staffing our law enforcement agencies, both prosecutors and officers, because that's where we've really been falling down on the job.
And public defenders as well.
And public defenders as well. Yes.
I say,
yes, they do. They are. Yeah. But we always think of this from a crime perspective, but it's I think the state's attorney has said there's 120 to 150 vacancies in her office. Mm-hmm. I mean, our human trafficking task force is down to one state attorney. These are critical manpower shortages where, for your crime, if your family is victimized, right, justice is being delayed.
Yeah.
Right. And so what happens is it emboldens more criminal activity.
Absolutely. And impunity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I have a lot more questions, but we're a little bit of time left. What do you think is the most important thing that is facing South Miami today?
Look, I think we've got nothing but opportunities in front of us. Even our challenges are opportunities. And I'm really excited about the fact that we have a working political coalition, that we're seeing new investment from small business to development coming to South Miami, that the public has seen that, the path forward is through investment. And so we're focused on enhancing our facilities, hopefully going to bring online a new city hall, police station, long held aspirations, never made a reality. Hopefully that'll start to move forward this year. We hope to kind of modernize a lot of our parks, but beyond that, we want to actually work with our public school system, since we are so short on land for recreation, to modernize their facilities. A lot of our facilities are co-located next to public schools. And so my ambition and discussions we're having with the district, and they're very excited about the possibility of more community-oriented schools, is making those facilities part of our recreational offerings so that the public gets a twofold return on that investment. And so, look, I think it's nothing but opportunities in front of us. We do have our challenges. We talked about staffing challenges in the police department. The economy and future receipts may be a challenge here as the economy slows. So we're mindful of all of that, but we're focused on the future. And that future is one born of creating an environment that's provides predictability around investment, and coupled with public investment to make South Miami the best place it can be.
Wonderful. Well, with that, thank you all for being here. You want to outro us?
No, thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.